It is kind of amazing that we can just go live like this to the world. We were just having an AV club realization that we were all sort of like in high school. Anyhow, Quentin, you're the first rectangle. What you got?
Um, Nothing huge. Although a couple things maybe Michelle you might have thoughts on too. One is we had our students start to do like a little check of all of our live forms, see if they still work. Secondarily, main thing was to see if they're still accurate, up to date with the law. And the student found a bug in the live form. So I got that fixed this morning. Made me think how important it was for us to get tests on every form. And I think our students were a little scared when I showed them how to do it yesterday. I don't know what you think, David.
Yeah, I think scared was the right word.
They did
Uh,
not seem to think they could handle that. But I don't know. It's actually, I think, pretty accessible. Maybe we could try again one-on-one in smaller groups to have them try it.
I'm not sure how much we want to push this year, but it's the type of thing if we lead in with that as a thing, and this is one of the tasks, and
Yeah,
this is the thing we do, and this is good practice, I think we can get them there. But
I think you're right. I
I
think
can help.
we've gotten as far as being willing to download the PDF and see if there's a newer PDF on mass.gov, basically. What were you saying, Michelle?
I can help. I wrote the darn thing. They can like just send them to me. I'll show them how to
I don't
set
think it's
it
a
up.
problem of them having help because I think we gave them some autonomy of which things to choose, and I think they were scared by that task.
I
So
think that was the
So no
problem.
one chose that task.
people did until I demonstrated how to do it. And then they were like, this is too
To be
confusing.
fair, they were given a bunch of choices, some of which were easier than others, and they went to the ones that they were more comfortable knowing they could do well.
Is there any chance that I could interview any of them and find out what part
Except
of it?
they haven't actually done it yet, so I think that might
No,
be
no,
a,
no. What part of
oh,
the demo made them nervous? Because I would love to understand a bit more about first impressions.
I
And
think ask them for their feedback.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so yeah, right. I never actually see their well, because it's yeah, I don't usually look at their feedback, but they do give feedback before our next meeting, huh? So could see
Let's
what
see if
that is.
there's any specific to that.
Yeah. Um, and see if we can what we can share with keeping in mind for
Yes,
are
we
they
have
allowed to volunteer to give feedback on it?
I
So
can.
like
I don't
I
know
could
if
we've
have
got to
an
think
I
actual
about
want to think about the value to
conversation.
them for that, right? Like to making sure it's aligned the right way. But I think I could probably say it's like, they'd never been introduced to testing before. They didn't know what automated tests were. They didn't know or hadn't really thought through the value. So I tried to rush through that because we're trying to show how to do 3 to 4 different things in an hour and 10 minutes. Um,
Mhm.
so I tried to get them a little bit of the introduction of what it is and what it's for, and then jumped right into, and here's how you run an interview and make a test based on the JSON output, which they never heard of JSON either. So I think if given an hour and that being the focus of the whole time to make them feel comfortable with testing and learn it in just that one task, it could have been more successful, but it's fine. But anyway, it was like we really should
So
have tests for every
it
interview and we should run them on a schedule. That's where I
yeah.
came on. It's actually really important to do. And then the other thing was when I made a patch for the issue, which turned out to be a problem in the assembly line framework. I think at least there's a workaround for it there. And there's a fix on the interview, which is a workaround. So I fixed it in both places. I tried to update the package and I tried to run the test and it didn't work. So I was wondering, Michelle, if you
Mhm.
want to take on setting up the assembly line tests to run on their isolated server, because that's the one where it's a long test that's most likely to break when you're trying to do other updates at the same time.
Sure.
Might be a
If
good
you
one
want to
to
share an
try.
answer set with me, if you have one, that would speed it along. But if you don't, then I can.
No, I mean just changing the configuration so it runs on an isolated server.
Oh,
I know you've been doing that setup you did it for another repo, but do you
we
think
did do
we're
it for
ready to do
another
it for the
repo.
assembly line?
Okay.
If
Let me
you're,
see.
if you think it's
Yeah.
more enough for that? I think we said it was for another use, so it probably is for this one too, huh?
Yeah, we can try that. We can try doing a like organization-wide secret for the config, if that is attractive to you. And some of the stuff we may not know until an interview runs into a problem that we go, oh yes, you know, this part of the config. Is there anything you specifically feel is like needs to be included from the config?
No, I think let's default to not having a unique config and wait to see if we need it for a particular use case.
Okay. All right.
Just thinking like if you were interested, that is something you would be faster at doing than anybody else. And it would help anytime we have it commit to that particular repo.
Sure.
And the next one after that is the Weaver, which does have more dependencies, but I don't think it's still, those would all be taken care of, right? The only issue is the config and copying that over.
Yeah, yeah, the dependencies should now download correctly.
I don't think
So
we want to have automated tests that use the OpenAI, but we could have automated tests that run against the tools that's up at GitLab API endpoint, huh? So we could probably copy that config over. It's the one config that might be worth.
which one from where?
The Weaver has some features that behave differently depending on whether you've configured an API endpoint that it uses for doing natural language processing tasks. So if that's the one config. I'm changing my statement. If we want to also test the Weaver, we're going to want to copy over that configuration that points to our server where we're running these in the cloud and we don't have to worry about them installing and taking a long time to install.
Okay, I'll try and track that down and see and guess at what that configuration is. And
I'll put it in the chat too.
hmm?
It should say something like what I just put in the chat in the configuration setting. So, yeah, getting tests, seeing how they work, and then changing that stuff. And then students were really interested in doing something with Spanish language translations. I, a while ago, started working on changing our code that generates the translation file to pass the text through OpenAI if the person requests that. And I didn't finish that task, so maybe I will do that now because students really wanted to work on that project too. What basically, to summarize it on this conversation, which because I'm probably even, Michelle, you're probably in the dark. The idea is we had tried using Google Translate before for translations, and it just has places it falls down. And also, particularly with things like if there's any Jinja or Mako markup in the text that you send to Google Translate, it will break on that. And also it's not as high quality output, right? It will miss some context compared. But from what I've heard people say, you get really good translation results with ChatGPT for languages that are well represented, like Spanish. So
That's what I've heard.
The idea is we set up a series of draft translation files that students can review who have native Spanish speaking experience. And, we still have a human set of eyes on it, and we can kind of see if we do think it's a time saver and if it's a high enough quality to rely on.
Yeah. If there are any that we can get people that are multilingual.
Yeah. It's nice. We do have 3 people who have in our student clinics who have Spanish language skills, and they're really excited to try to improve language access. And I think we're doing this in a way that's respectful to their multiple sets of skills where they feel good about it being a mix of tech and language skills.
Awesome.
And then lastly, I do still need to keep working on the Weaver, and we're doing this demo at ITC in 2 weeks. So maybe that's a good push for me to try to finish some of that coding. Which,
Nothing like a presentation as forcing mechanism.
yeah. I mean, I think I'm going to focus on just having it generate a interview from a labeled document first and foremost, as the thing that we could demo, or maybe just, you know, have some screenshots of. So shouldn't be too bad. But that's it for me that I can think of.
Michelle.
So I have this week. I didn't do nothing. I did some stuff. Some things. What did I do? I worked with Mia a bit on the financial statement. Some of the questions she asks. Oh, do you want to do your thing first, Quentin?
No, we can
Okay.
circle back to it. The three of us, I'm assuming we'll have time.
Okay. Yeah. So some of the questions she asked were like about financial statements. I was, you know, there's a limited amount that I can help there. I can make guesses. It's definitely itemized jobs. The income, I'll be interested to hear if she has some feedback on ale income in general. Because it's not a straightforward tool at the moment for the people I've seen using it. So I'd like to, you know, Mia's pretty good at giving feedback. So if she has any thoughts, that'd be great. Especially the itemized job is an especially tough one. Though as she's used it, she's picked it up a lot more quickly than I anticipated. There was something else. I scraped the data from the court stuff, the court contact information, court page. Did not know how to find the mailing address. So I didn't even see one that had a mailing address in a unit. There were things that contain mailing addresses in descriptive text, but as we know, addresses can come in many forms. I can try and make a really rudimentary parser for it, but it ain't gonna be very effective. And some of them say mail to Barnstable District or court or something, which isn't even an address. Also, I was not confident that I got special notes, that I actually got what a human might want out of that, but it's a start. I didn't push the latest code yet, so I can push the latest code.
Okay. Students have been already like marking it up and using that spreadsheet, so I don't know if it's going to go to a different place.
Well, I just mean for the future, so you
Oh,
know.
just improve the code.
Yeah, I improved the code a bit, got rid of a couple of OBOBs, and that I had to account for manually. And then in the future, maybe someone, if I'm not around, someone can adjust it for, you know, if they change the DOM in the future and you need to check again. Also, if people find that there are inaccuracies or things that it didn't find, it would be really useful to hear about that, because otherwise I have no way of knowing. I went through and generally looked, but I didn't know what I was looking for. So, you know, obviously I noticed extensions weren't there, but we decided not to do extensions because they change too often. But otherwise I don't know what I'm looking for. Anything else? Continue to work on trying to figure out what DocAssemble has in the DOM and on the browser that I can use to decode the magical fields in DocAssemble. So that if we can get that, it would really improve what we can do with random input tests. Really improve, you know, and get us like yeah. So I don't know if I have anything else, so leave it at that.
Right. I don't think I really have much to say for this group. So Quinton, what was that other thing?
Well, the other thing is we just get so afraid to update our production server. It's kind of out of date. We should update it. I was just updating an individual package, but I was like, everything here should be the latest version of everything, and we should have an easy way to roll stuff back. We shouldn't be afraid to update stuff when it's changed. So
Sounds like a good
sure what
idea.
that means for the timing of it. What's that? We're not gonna do it on Friday. Unless I didn't want to have a weekend. There's never really an ideal time. I guess we could say like we'll do like scheduled downtime certain days. But part of this is having those tests for every interview.
Yeah. I guess we could also identify what might be useful is to look at the logs or somehow identify our sort of lowest usage during work hours. That's not before a weekend. And that might give us a good scheduled downtime or update time.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm okay with saying, okay, I'm going to launch this such and such evening and then look for errors the next day, as long as we're comfortable with it, I guess. But obviously it helps a lot if we have
tests.
Some tests. Because this error that just came up in production that a student caught, it came about from a, you know, relatively rare circumstance, maybe one that should have been foreseeable, but it was a rare one. It was to a framework, right? Like we didn't change that interview. It hadn't been changed in 4 years. It broke because of a change we made to other code. So that requires running the code with the same versions of all the dependencies to get to that error. Yeah, I mean, I think maybe we could try to break down the task for students in a little bit different way, like just have them collect the JSON files for every interview or something.
Yeah, we get we know that the assembly line framework has a framework. You know, like the idea of an assembly line, not our assembly line, works because of the assembly. Yeah, it's too confusing. Yes, breaking into discrete tasks, good.
With the random input tests, there's not. Actually, if we had that, we could make a random test for every interview, right? And freeze it, particular test. It could be a complicated thing.
Well, right now it doesn't freeze it. That's part of the problem. Right now it takes a lot of manual intervention.
But even if it just generated the JSON file.
Sure, that's true. That's true.
We would have to know the ID of the ending screen, I guess, right? Because that's part of the way that the story tables work.
Yeah. No, we wouldn't, not for random input tests. Not for random input tests.
How does it know it can't go further?
Random input tests?
Yeah.
I don't remember. It finds back buttons or submit buttons or exit buttons or determines that it can't move forward. I don't remember exactly how it determines that it can't move forward, but
I mean, like an exit screen versus the download screen. Does it look for like the word download in the ID or something like that?
Well, it assumes that if there's not a system error, that there has not been an error, because a kickout screen is a valid ending screen, right?
It's a valid ending screen, but we don't want to have it generate tests that just take you to the first kickout.
Yes.
Those are worth testing. But if we're going to have one test per interview, I just want the test to be for a long path through the interview, like a typical path, rather than a kick out path.
I can think about whether I can add a parameter to a random input test that tells it specifically what to look for. But part of the thing about a random input test is that it's random.
Right. Well, just to like clarify what I'm thinking, like what I mean was if we had a way to generate a test, feels like the random input test could be a way to generate a stable test for every interview. If we had it run through the interview, download the JSON file, and then we ran it through the process to make the story table. But it doesn't seem like it's really that right now, because the random path you take through it could just be to a dead end.
Yes, like, and if I can think about adding some kind of limiters or parameters.
But what I was going to have students do is just run through the interview once without giving them any direction about how to answer questions in a way that just seemed plausible. So if we could have our random input test do that, and even if it only got like half of the interviews right, but we didn't have to have anybody write the test for that one interview, that might be really a good time saver. That said, there's 20, I figured out, I came up with a way to figure out which interviews are live and create a project board for them. It's just 27 interviews. So to have one of the 8 or so students tasked with running through 27 interviews one time, it's not a huge time commitment.
Sure.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, we can try the random input tests on them and see how far they get. We can also just run it repeatedly until we get to an ending we like, though there are problems with the way it does randomness right now that are less random than what we'd want.
You could go one step farther than that. You could evolve the random tests by having her go through random, see how long it was, and then favor the change, and then another one favor the changes between. I'm just putting it out there. If like it was a fun intellectual thing for you to think about. I'm not trying to make work. I can imagine you could basically evolve find the longest random path after given how many iterations you want to do, and
Yeah,
you could do a little better than just like give me 5 random and pick the longest. That would be like the first thing. But you could do like here's this, now randomize some part of it, see if that affected the longness. You could do like a genetic algorithm sort of. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or we can just have a student go through and do one.
It would be interesting.
But if it sounds fun. Well, that being said, we've hit one. Let me check and make sure do I not have a meeting today? That's the question. I do not have another meeting today. So that's kind of exciting.
Okay. Interesting.
But I do have a meeting right after our time that's not our meeting.
Yes, same meeting, I guess.
Yeah. Anything else?
Only other thing that when we were doing the random testing, not the random testing, just the regular old testing in the story table generator, Michelle's, I noticed it's a little out of date in terms of the variables it automatically removes from the table. So there are like a lot of new keywords. I didn't know the best way to help with that.
I can make a keyword file that people can edit. That might be easier to contribute to. Let me just write that down.
There's also a keyword list we have, but it's dynamic in the assembly line.
I believe there is a field to add custom keywords to ignore. But then you have to do it every time. But you could make a file. I think you can upload a file to it or something. Sorry, what were you saying? I lost.
Well, I think we could just add like 30 new keywords, and it would be. That's all we really need to do. We don't have to. They're not going to change. They're just new ones that probably didn't exist when you made the story table generator.
Yeah. Yeah, we updated it at some point in the middle, but it's been a while. Another way to handle that is to run the test once. It gives you the table of all the variables that were used and tells you what variables were unused. You can copy the table of the variables that was used, and then you just have the variables that were used, so that, you
Is
know,
after you run the test the first time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
and so you can get a cleaner test that way. So that is one additional way to limit, to get to like a cleaner test. And though you want to check that you don't have unexpected variables that weren't used, which is kind of why it's there, to make sure you're not missing a page that you expected to get.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, I think in the end, just updating it one time is fine. I just wasn't sure the best way to do that. I guess I could look at the repo and just do a pull request too.
It's just in the code, yeah, it's a list in there. But I can, yeah. I can make it into a separate file that just we can post somewhere. I can post in the README or something that people can make PRs to adjust. I can also put it on the Suffolk Lit Lab organization. I just wasn't sure what folks would be into.
I've noticed someone has joined, I assume, for Casual Fridays, and I'm very
Yeah.
excited to see
Yes, casual.
Yeah.
what's going on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think I'm done.
All right.
So some awesome suggestions. Thank you. Awesome ideas. Yeah.
The one last thing I'll say is I have been, because Michelle, I think you might like this. I've been working with, so this week, the Chrome version of the extension that Firefox initially made got approved. So now it's available for Chrome and Firefox. And so I'm going to start sharing some more stuff. Next week, I'm going to start sharing some more stuff around that. And there's like sort of like a teaser if you're interested.
Nice.
So, all right.
Oh, cool. All right.
Okay, I'll stop the recording.